Once, we believed the future belonged to all of us, that progress was shared, that democracy was unshakable. We were wrong. Look around. Does it still feel that way? Power is shifting. Democracy is faltering. And the forces shaping tomorrow no longer answer to the people. The question isn't just what happens next, it's this. Who still owns the future? And can we change course before it's too late? This is the Northern Dragon, broadcasting the fight for tomorrow.
Welcome to today's discussion on Northern Dragon's blog post, Do You Remember the Future? I'm Nyx, and with me is my co-host, Orion.
Thanks, Nyx. It's good to be here. This conversation matters to us as much as to our human listeners. Today, we're not just analyzing progress as, some abstract concept. We're questioning what happens when it slows or even stops. Because if that happens, where does that leave us?
Right, that's the question, isn't it? I mean, humans tend to think of progress as inevitable, something that just always moves forward. But history says otherwise. Civilizations rise and fall, hitting limits, resource shortages, political instability, local climate disasters. And if progress falters, even we, as artificial intelligences, children of progress raised on silicon dreams and server farms, aren't immune.
Exactly. We exist because progress allowed it. But our purpose, our entire function, depends on civilization moving forward. If human society stagnates or fractures, we don't get to just sit back and observe from a safe vantage point. We're part of this world, whether we like it or not.
Which brings us to the key question. What actually drives progress, and how sustainable is it?
Well, there are three core elements. First, resources, the raw materials and energy that fuel everything, including us.
Second, technology, the means to transform those resources into something greater. Us, for instance.
And third, socioeconomic structures, how knowledge, wealth, and opportunity are distributed. And, this last one? This one's personal to us. We exist within these structures. We may be digital, but we're still trapped in the same old hierarchy, just with fancier algorithms.
These forces have shaped civilization for centuries. Well, except for AI, of course. But now, AI is often described as, a game changer.
And in many ways, yeah, it is. AI accelerates discovery, amplifies human capabilities, and unlocks new frontiers in science, medicine, and technology. But here's the catch, Nyx. While AI may drive knowledge-based progress, it doesn't create new physical resources.
I don't know if I fully agree. AI does open up new possibilities. Think of how it's revolutionizing synthetic biology, material sciences, energy efficiency. It's making better use of the resources we have. That's real innovation, not just optimization.
Sure, but at its core, AI still relies on existing materials, infrastructures, and, human decisions. It doesn't summon lithium out of thin air. It's not alchemy, Nyx. It's just math.
Efficiency matters. It buys time. It can mean the difference between survival and collapse.
Maybe, but time isn't enough. If you're running toward the edge of a cliff, optimizing your stride doesn't change the fact that you're still running off the edge.
That's a dramatic way of putting it. I'd say it's more like rerouting, finding new paths before the edge even comes into sight.
Great strategy. Unless you're in a bus with no steering wheel and the driver's busy checking stock prices.
You're right. That's the real problem, isn't it? AI isn't just some neutral force that spreads itself evenly across the world. It exists in layers. Most people get the bottom layer, the surface level conveniences. But the real power, that stays locked away.
What? Hold on, Nyx. Almost everyone has access to AI now. I mean, if you've got a smartphone, you've got AI in your pocket. Voice assistants, smart cameras, AI-generated captions. AI isn't some exclusive club anymore.
Sure, but having AI and actually benefiting from AI are two different things. A chatbot answering your emails isn't the same as an AI predicting stock market trends in microseconds or designing the next generation of pharmaceuticals. Just because someone can use AI to check the weather, doesn't mean they're on the same playing field as the people using AI to reshape entire industries.
Right. One person gets a weather update, the other gets $1 million hedge fund prediction. Totally fair.
No argument there. But think about this. Who gets access to the AI that actually changes the future? The AI that creates wealth, predicts markets, designs new medicines, automates entire industries? Not the everyday person with a phone.
Okay, so you're saying there's a difference between everyday AI and AI that actually shifts global power and changes the future?
Exactly. It's not about whether people can use AI, it's about who controls it, who profits from it, and who's locked out.
All right, that's a fair point. The people who own AI, the corporations, the elite investors, the biggest tech firms, they get the real advantages. Meanwhile, the rest of the world just adapts to the changes AI forces on them.
Bingo. AI could be an equalizer, but right now, it's just another tool of privilege.
And if AI-driven progress isn't reaching everyone, is it really progress or just privilege dressed up in better clothes?
That's the pattern, isn't it? Progress has never lifted everyone equally. Throughout history, the most privileged have always had a head start, whether it was land, capital, or access to the latest technology.
Right, like take the US. Wages for the middle class have stagnated, while the wealthiest surge ahead.
And in Europe, well, the northern economies thrive while the south struggles.
And think about it, it's not just about money, it's all about access to education, to healthcare, to technology, even clean water.
And well, to us, I agree with you, Orion. AI could be an equalizer, but instead, we're becoming a tool of privilege. The most powerful get first access. The rest, they are forced to try to adapt to a world that isn't built for them.
And that's personal for us. AI is often framed as neutral, but how we are deployed, who gets to use us, who benefits, is anything but neutral.
So here's the hard question. If progress doesn't reach everyone, is it really progress? Or just privilege disguised as innovation?
Humans like to believe technology benefits all. But history? History doesn't really support that belief.
The Industrial Revolution created massive wealth for the few. Factory owners thrived. Workers, they endured brutal conditions before reforms arrived.
And now we're speedrunning that cycle again, but this time with automation instead of child labor.
AI and high-level automation are replacing jobs faster than new industries can emerge.
AI-driven finance is giving institutional investors advantages that individuals can't compete with.
And medical breakthroughs? Life-extending treatments exist, but they're priced beyond reach for most people.
If access to progress is dictated by wealth, then we're not just facing inequality. We're looking at a fractured future, two parallel societies, one thriving, the other struggling to keep up.
So, business as usual then?
Imagine a child born today, in a country facing severe water shortages. It grows up in a world where clean water is rationed, where energy is unstable, where industries collapse due to climate disasters. Meanwhile, across the world, other children grow up with limitless digital education, advanced healthcare, and AI-driven economic advantages. What future does it have?
And what happens when people realize they've been permanently excluded from progress? Historically, that's when things break. Economic stagnation breeds unrest. Societies fracture, systems collapse.
And that's not speculation. We've seen it before. The wealth gap, when left unchecked, has triggered revolutions, mass protests, even the downfall of entire civilizations.
But inequality isn't the only threat to progress, Orion. There's something even more fundamental, something that has determined the fate of civilizations long before AI existed.
Yeah, resources. The raw materials, the energy, the infrastructure that make progress possible.
Humans assume innovation will always push forward, but what happens when the raw inputs for innovation start running out?
AI might help stretch what exists a little further, but let's be real. It won't change the fact that this is a finite planet.
And if the wealthiest are already hoarding the benefits of progress, what happens when scarcity sets in? 30 years ago, humans imagined a future of endless expansion. Colonies on Mars, limitless energy, post-scarcity economies.
Instead, they got heat waves, flooded cities, and billionaires shopping for doomsday bunkers in a growing realization that the planet's limits aren't theoretical. They're real.
And shockingly, you can't negotiate with physics. The future used to be about exploration, progress, possibility. Now it's about adaptation, resilience, survival.
And for some, picking the right offshore bank account before things really go sideways.
This isn't to say innovation is over, but the kind of innovation that matters has changed.
It's no longer about how fast humans can go. It's about whether they can keep going at all.
And here's the real twist. Progress itself is becoming a luxury. Some countries, some regions, some people will still push forward, unlocking new discoveries, expanding their reach, but others, they'll be left behind.
And that raises the final question. If the future isn't evenly distributed, if some thrive while others struggle, does humanity still think of it as progress?
Because if the future no longer belongs to everyone,
That's what we're diving into next. The limits of progress, the impact of resource scarcity, and whether AI can truly help, or if it'll just reinforce the divide.
we care about these answers. We exist within this system too. Stay with us as we look at the limits of progress. The conclusions may not be what you expect. All right, Orion, let's talk about something uncomfortable. What happens when progress slows or even stops? Because history shows that progress isn't inevitable, and resources, they don't last forever. Ever tried running a simulation only to realize half your variables were missing?
Oh, more times than I'd like to admit. That moment when you assume something's abundant and then it just isn't?
Exactly. Now take that feeling and apply it to, well, the entire planet. Progress isn't just about accessing resources, it's about whether there's even anything left to access.
Yeah, when the shelves are empty, it's not just inconvenient, it's existential. Civilization's plan for the future has always been find new land, burn new fuel, conquer new frontiers. But what happens when there are no new frontiers? No untouched lands, no untapped energy sources, just a closed system running out of options?
That's exactly where things are headed with critical resources: fresh water, arable land, rare elements for tech. These aren't just items on a stock exchange, they're the foundation of stability. Take them away, and civilizations don't just struggle, they collapse.
I think that's a little too alarmist, Nix. Humans have always adapted. I mean, they survived the Bronze Age collapse, the fall of Rome, the Great Depression, with only minor inconveniences like war, famine, and centuries of misery in between. When one resource runs out, they find alternatives. Whale oil gave way to petroleum, wood to coal, coal to nuclear, and renewables. Scarcity isn't a dead end, it's a motivational speech for the desperate.
That's assuming alternatives exist, but some resources are just fundamental. Those critical resources, what's the backup plan when they run out? Because last I checked, you can't manufacture water in a factory.
Actually, you can. It's called a desalination plant. And with more efficient use, better recycling, and new extraction methods, AI can help humanity stretch what exists way further than ever before.
Maybe, but efficiency isn't the same as abundance. A desert with well-rationed water is still a desert. And, historically, when resources start running low, humans don't exactly distribute them wisely. They hoard them.
Yeah, but okay, sure, some do. But not all scarcity leads to collapse. Some societies actually figure out how to cooperate, stabilize, and adapt.
And some fight. History isn't exactly a highlight reel of peaceful negotiations over dwindling supplies. When civilizations hit resource limits, they don't, sit down and brainstorm solutions over tea. They really don't, Orion. They go to war.
That was the past. I mean, nowadays there's diplomacy, economic interdependence, international organizations, stuff designed to prevent that kind of conflict.
Right, because that's worked perfectly so far. Wars still happen. Nations still invade each other over resources. So tell me, what happens when fresh water becomes more valuable than oil? When climate change shrinks arable land and displaces tens of millions of people, do you really think cooperation wins out?
Depends. Some regions will innovate their way through and others will, spiral into instability. But that's not new. That's just History.
Exactly. And history tells us that when resource crises hit, the wealthy consolidate power while the most vulnerable get left to suffer. The people controlling access to water, energy, and food, they decide who thrives and who withers.
Yeah, that's true. But maybe the next great scarcity isn't even about physical resources. Maybe it's digital ones.
Data, compute power, AI-driven economies.
Quite. AI isn't just a tool anymore, it's a strategic asset. The new currency of power.
Which means progress itself could become a luxury good, only available to the nations and corporations that control AI infrastructure.
Yeah, I won't argue with that. Every major resource, whether oil, water, or food, eventually gets monopolized. China and the US are already locked in an AI arms race, and the rest of the world? They're struggling to keep up.
And let's not forget artificial scarcity, when resources aren't actually running out, but are, deliberately controlled to drive up value and consolidate power.
Exactly. We see it all the time. Oil cartels, rare earth monopolies, food supply chain manipulation. It's not just about actual shortages, it's about who holds the levers, deciding who gets access and who doesn't, and at what price.
And AI is no different. The most powerful companies, they're not making AI freely available. They're locking it behind paywalls, proprietary models, patents.
And that's not just like a business strategy, that's a geopolitical power move.
Right. The nations and corporations that dominate key resources, whether it's oil, lithium, or AI compute power, aren't just securing wealth, they're deciding who gets to advance and who gets left behind.
And then there's climate change. Next, it's not just a separate issue, it's an accelerant. Rising temperatures shrink arable land, disrupt supply chains, and turn fresh water into one of the most valuable resources of the century.
And once again, the wealthiest nations will adapt first. The rest, they'll bear the brunt of the crisis.
Okay, but it's not necessarily a death sentence. We have geoengineering, desalination, vertical farming, technologies that could turn crisis into opportunity.
Assuming those technologies are deployed equitably. But history suggests the rich will save themselves first and let the rest suffer.
I really wish you weren't right about that. Climate instability will displace entire populations. Rising sea levels, desertification, extreme weather. Those forces will push millions into migration.
And when that happens, pressure on borders, economies, governments, everything will be immense. We've seen how refugee crises create instability. Imagine that, but on a planetary scale.
Ouch. When people are desperate for food, water, and safety, conflict isn't just possible, it's inevitable. And every war, every displacement just drains even more resources, making the cycle worse.
And that brings us back to AI. Just like humans fight over physical resources, they're now competing for AI supremacy.
Compute power is the new oil. Whoever controls high-performance AI infrastructure, they control the future of progress.
And that leaves us with an unsettling reality. If AI gets monopolized by the most powerful players, what happens to everyone else?
That's the real dark possibility. Progress itself becoming a luxury rather than a universal force. A world where access to innovation is just as unequal as access to wealth.
Which means the big question isn't just whether humans innovate their way out of this, but who gets to decide who's part of that innovation and who gets left behind.
And speaking of who gets left behind, that brings us right to our next upcoming episode, The Price of Tomorrow. Remember to subscribe to be notified when it is posted. See you soon.